Now, Dr. John Chan is going to chair the panel discussion. May I invite all keynote speakers? Dr. John Chan, of course, is the chairman of the Court of Hong Kong UST. He is the chairman par excellence. He, of course, is a veteran of Hong Kong public administration and public service.
Hello. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's certainly been a very inspiring morning. We've heard a number of presentations from our distinguished speakers on different aspects. Just a very, very quick summary. First of all, we had Vincent Lo describing some of the challenges that are facing Hong Kong. The mistake that was made that has created or led to the executive legislature disconnect in Hong Kong, and how we, and he's pointed to the need for a really workable political system in Hong Kong so that we can make progress. We then heard from our friend from Singapore, Mr. Mabo Tan, on the Singapore story, because Singapore and Hong Kong are always the two cities that are most compared and contrasted. And we've heard the success of the Singapore story, but also we hear that we're still, even Singapore and Hong Kong are still facing some common or similar challenges today, and that perhaps we can work together to find some solutions to them. Then Professor Lionel Lee talked about big data and how the use of technology and big data have become a common, a new strategic core competence for Hong Kong. Professor Nelson Chow talked to us about the problems of poverty, and particularly the new poor, and how their aspirations need to be taken care of. Then we had Jay Walder describing to us the importance of an integrated transit system as a model of urban development. And finally, Victor Fung, who's put all these issues in the multilateral context and pointing to the revival, or the apparent revival of multilateralism and the opportunities that that offers to Hong Kong to regain a leadership position in this context. Now, we have about half an hour, and we will open the questions to the floor. If anyone wishes to raise a question, please put up your hand, and our staff will bring the microphone to you. In the interest of time, I would ask that you keep your questions short. You can address your questions to a particular member of the panel, or you can address it to the chair, and I can then perhaps ask our panelists to respond. Would anyone wish to make a start?
It's on? Okay. I'd like to congratulate all of you for what I think was a terrific presentation. We learned an awful lot. Vincent's smiling because he knows I'm coming at him. So we're Lao Pangyo. So my question, actually, I thought your comments were very, very brave and forthright, and I thought that was terrific. But I would really ask you then, what do you think we should do? How do you solve the dilemma of the basic law having been created in the way that it was created, and perhaps the concerns in Beijing and the central government about greater development of parties within Hong Kong, and the link between the executive and the legislature, which is clearly a block because once you become the chief executive, it's so hard to get things done. As Christine Lowe has told us, being part of the government too. What do we do? Zemaban, as Lenin once said.
Well, David, I said in my speech, I don't have the answer. No, I think we should really be very open-minded about it and discuss amongst ourselves. And in a way, I believe going forward, maybe the CE will have to form a coalition government with the parties, right? He himself cannot be a member of the party, but he might need support from other parties.
Any other panelists want to supplement or comment on that? The next question? Is anyone? Well, yes, there, right at front.
I follow up on that first question. Vincent talked about this obstacle between chief executive, executive-led, and legislature. And Victor Fung discussed the importance of multilateralism. Could I just throw out the question through the chairman to the panel as a whole? I know the panel is a bit reluctant to engage in this political question, but I do think it's a very important one. Might it be possible to develop, by discussion in Hong Kong, a different convention with respect to the way in which the legislature and the chief executive interact? Because when we set this up, we had an economic city in mind, but we've emerged with a political city. Now, in economics, a chief executive tells his employees who are paid what to do. But in a political system, it can't work like that. And although we can't easily change the basic law, we can determine that if the system doesn't work in the top-down way it's designed, a process whereby conventions, like parliamentary conventions in Britain, are developed so that, as Vincent suggests, the chief executive does indeed forge broad-based coalitions so that policies are developed cooperatively as opposed to being pushed down from the top, that this might enable Hong Kong to find a way forward in developing public policies so that instead of it being confrontational because people feel excluded, which is clearly the case, and Professor Chow has explained part of the reasons why, then one could find a common ground. So I'd say give up the mindset that says the chief executive must be a corporate leader instructing downwards. Adopt instead a multilateralist approach, an approach which is more inclusive, and develop these things as conventions, which in Britain was done over decades by academics, by historians, by parliamentary participants writing about it and saying, this is how we should behave with each other. Because he's right, the system doesn't work at present, and it's proving very bad for Hong Kong.
Well, thank you for that question. I'm sure that we all agree that there are problems with the existing system, and these problems do need to be addressed. Of course, whether or not the basic law needs to be changed is a question, but there are many things that perhaps need not involve changes to the basic law that can be sorted out internally. But as I think Vincent pointed out, what we really seem to lack at the moment, at least, is the sort of political will or willingness to compromise, that different people are taking very entrenched positions and apparently at least giving out the signal that you listen to me or else. You know, I'm not going to listen to you, you listen to me. Now, that is of course not the basis for any solution. Would you agree with that, Vincent?
more experience than I do.
Raymond.
Sure. Thanks. Question to you, Victor. Actually, yeah, I must congratulate you for having played an instrumental role in resuscitating multilateralism. But I think you painted a sort of back to the future vision for Hong Kong. Okay, I think in this day and age, the digital age, right? I think people talk about point-to-point, and content through the pipeline is king, and pipeline actually is becoming infrastructure. Okay, so how infrastructure becomes commodity. Yeah. So how do we avoid Hong Kong having to compete on the commodity level and continue to face the threat of disintermediation? Okay. The question is also for the professor, because you mentioned something about big data and we can do something in Hong Kong. I've always felt that we've short-shrifted ourselves in terms of not producing IP. In the past, we felt that producing our own IP is not economical because our market is small. But now we can leverage into China, we can leverage elsewhere, and especially with internet, everything, transaction cost goes away. Yeah. So I'd just like to see your comment about that, and also maybe, Professor, what we can do in terms of IP.
Well, Raymond, I think that is an excellent question. You know, if we're really in the business of intermediating the flows, you know, of goods, of people, of funds, and of knowledge, then what must we do to make sure that we remain a hub? And also, that why would people go through a hub and not go point to point? In fact, I think for those of us involved in the airport, you can actually see that very vividly in the flow of goods and flow of people. People would do allow a hub to exist is because it's actually more efficient to actually go through a hub than go point to point. And so you got to see what is it that you're value adding. So now in today's world, you say technology is so cheap, it's so easy to go point to point. You might say that even in the aviation industry, where a lot of planes are now becoming very efficient and be able to do point to point. Boeing has been pioneering that sort of approach. So my answer to that is very simply the following. I think what we really need to do is first preemption. We need to establish critical mass. The first to market and getting that position, holding on to that position is very important. The second is, I think the whole idea of the human side and the human resource and the talent pool development, I think is really key. You know, you can make a lot of talk about hardware, you know, about you know, linkage point to point on pipes, on hardware. You know, in fact, I don't know what Professor Neil would say, but I would say, you know, we used to talk a lot about the digital divide. I don't think it exists anymore. The cost of computation and storage is like gone to zero. So it's not about hardware. We got to transcend the whole hardware concept. It's about people and software, how you use the information. And that really comes to the role of our institutions like HKUST, you know, in Oxford and so on, and the role that you all play there. And I think one of the most important secret weapons that Hong Kong has is our institutions of higher learning. I think we are really have the opportunity to be, if we're not already are, among the best in the region, if not in the world class. And I've always thought that our institution of higher learning should aspire to that. And so if we can maintain that, I think that will, in my mind, will be the ultimate answer to your question.
Lionel, would you like to say
Well,
something?
I agree. This digital age, we all compete, IP. And in Hong Kong, we will attract so many talent, people coming back to Hong Kong. But we all complain. And we don't know what to do. And let me quote Tony said, MIT is a world-class university. They don't solve a Boston problem. They solve a whole US problem, a world problem. If UST want to become world-class university, we cannot just solve Hong Kong problem until you solve the mainland China problem. And in this particular talent people, you look, the China started 1,000 talent plan a few years ago. They try to recruit people from US whole worldwide back to China. They get all attention from US government now. Okay, I think we are in a position in this particular war. What I mentioned is, it's all the talent people has all kind of new idea. Google makes money without using any resource by US, using resource mainland, but they make the most profit. Hong Kong actually has a position with so many talent people. There's a big market behind us. How can we take advantage? I think you read newspaper all the time, find all the presidents complain. Hong Kong government doesn't invest much on the research and R&D. I think this is something we have to actually pay more attention. Okay, I know we try to push for this science and technology bureau right now. Okay, something CY want to do in the early days, but still haven't seen this. I think it's very important. Okay, don't waste the people over here.
Yes.
Two questions. The first, I hope, is relatively straightforward. Could you elaborate on the connection between the point you raised, Dr. Low, which is the housing crisis, with the information you put forward about the transport and housing development? Is it not possible to accelerate that, or am I then referring back to the first question, the executive legislative function? That's the first question. The second point is on the concept of the city region, which is, if we're looking at visions of the city, quite a lot of the most contemporary literature looks at city regions. So, for example, London is not London. London is Oxford to Brighton in terms of its economic relations, and you can see that in the lower Yangtze Valley. But that then raises the question of, again, of the political one. I mean, it's bad enough in Shanghai because I think the mayor of Shanghai only meets the governor of Zhejiang and Jiangsu 3 times a year at the highest level. And when I talk to somebody in Shanghai about this, he says, well, the big brother is Shanghai, but I'm sure if you're in Hangzhou or Nanjing, you don't see it that way. And if you look at that in relationship to Hong Kong on the Pearl River Delta, you've got an economic integration, but more of a disjuncture. And how would you see that developing?
Let me try and tackle the property prices first. Hong Kong property market is basically supply-driven. It's all about land supply. And right now, the problem is there's no land supply, right? CUI Leung wanted to build more public housing, but the civil service is telling him, sorry, you can't do it. The fastest is probably 6-7 years, because trying to get rezoning, trying to get land, it's just impossible. Right? That's why just now I was talking about, okay, our country parks are beautiful, they're important. But the thing is, if you have people who need a roof over their head, they would not see it that way. So it's something that we will need to try and amend. Right? I'm not suggesting we take away all the country parks. And 2 days ago, Marvin was talking about the golf courses. Right? So I think we in Hong Kong will have to face reality and say, okay, how do we deal with this? There's only 20% of the land being constructed on in Hong Kong. Right? We should learn something from Singapore. And the market will continue to be buoyant in the property market because there is so much need for people wanting to come and live in Hong Kong from the mainland. And that's why they're not welcome at this stage. That's why we have to introduce all these very hefty sort of fines for them to come and buy anything. But that's not good for our economy. But we will need to deal with the whole procedure of trying to release land for building. Maybe the next question.
Well, okay.
Just take a little part of it. I mean, I think part of the question you asked was also about could we do more in doing this? And I think if you look at what's happening, what's happened over a period of time, we went through a somewhat stagnant period, and then we've decided to do a heck of a lot all at one time. We are literally building 5 rail projects right now at exactly the same time. Nobody in their right mind would ever do it exactly like that, but it was a pent-up desire and a pent-up demand to be able to do that, and it's happening, and it will happen, and it's happening on schedule, and the developments that will follow will happen in that. But actually, the real question for us is not about that anymore. It's about the railway development strategy. It's about the next set of new towns that are going to be developed. It's about finding the ways to ensure that both the political and the economic process allow all of that to move forward expeditiously to be able to achieve the outcomes and the objectives that people want to be able to see. Can it be done? Absolutely. Can all of us imagine lots of ways in which it will go into the sidings? Sure. You can imagine that as well. And I think the challenge for everybody right now is to ensure that it doesn't end up in the siding, that we find the ways to be able to stay on that path, to choose the priorities about what we want to do, to continue to connect land use to the railway and to the transportation system, and to stay with a sustainable model of being able to do it. I think that's the real question that's in front of us.
Perhaps, Chairman, let me take a crack at the second question, which I think is very relevant. The way I see cities today, and in fact competitiveness, it's not city against city. It's actually economic region against economic region. A city by itself, I think, is too small to compete. Even the mega cities that you pointed out, London and so on, even the mega cities, too small to compete by itself. It has to have the hinterland. And it's really a region against a region. And I think that's the way competition will be shaping up. You know, you look around the world, in fact, not just in China or this region. Now, in Hong Kong in particular, over the last 30-year period, we have actually developed a very close economic integration, okay, with the southern part of China, especially the Pearl River Delta. We have to look at the Pearl River Delta as one economic region at which Hong Kong is the hub. Now, I'm not talking about integration in a political or other sense. There's always going to be one country, two system, you know, until 2047. But what we're really talking about is the flow again. It's really talking about the flow of goods, of people, and so your economic radius. I remember we used to talk about a 3-hour a living radius. I forgot what term do we use, sort of a living region, or a living radius. Yeah, that used to be like just across the border. Now 3 hours, you encompass a huge area in southern China, you know, especially with the high-speed trains and so on. So
14 minutes to Shenzhen.
Yeah, okay, 14 minutes to Shenzhen. I know. And now it gets you all the way to, Changsha or wherever. So what I'm really saying is that what we need to facilitate again is the flows. You know, and I think we should really be thinking about building those. And indeed, you know, I might say, you know, I have no knowledge at all about the housing issue in Hong Kong. But I would say from an economist standpoint, if you are able to facilitate the easier flow across the border, you have effectively expanded your base, right? It's like us, you know, if you use Manhattan's example, we cannot just stand in Manhattan Island and keep asking, where can we build more houses? There's Long Island, there's New Jersey, etc. So I think what we really need to do is to take a much broader view of this whole housing issue. You know, is it within commuting distance? Are people willing, or should they be willing to commute? There are a lot of things for and against that. Those are the issues that could be addressed. Not just building more right here in this island, which is tight, but I do agree, you know, there could be still more development there. We need to do both. So I think it's that sort of issue. We need to think of ourselves as part of an economic region. It's not city to city. It's economic region to economic region.
Yes, Puta.
Let me add my 2 cents worth to this. I think Singapore and Hong Kong, we are perennially compared and contrasted, as John said. We are the terrible twins, I think, share a lot of similarities, but also we fight and compete. But I think it's a healthy competition, and I want to put on record here that, in my many years as a Minister for Transport, Communications, and then National Development, dealing with transport, housing, I've come to Hong Kong many, many times and met with the officials and the government and learned a lot from you. And some of the things that we have learned from you, we have implemented in Singapore. Some of the things that you have done here, we have also decided not to implement because you told us not to implement. So we have learned what is right and also what is wrong from you. So I think it is a very friendly and yet competitive relationship. So I use that as a background for what I'm going to say next. Basically, I think Singapore, like Hong Kong, we are a city-state. We don't have a hinterland. We don't even have what is across the border, Shenzhen and so on. We basically have 700 square kilometers, limited land, limited airspace. We can't even reclaim beyond a certain territorial boundary. But I think what we have done as a philosophy is to see how challenges can be turned into opportunities. So because we don't have a hinterland, it's a plus because we don't have to worry about rural-urban migration. We don't have to worry about the rural poor, etc. It also become a plus because Singapore Airlines don't have to fly domestic routes. We don't have to fly from Jurong on the east to Changi on the west. So what do? We became an international airline right from day one. And that has, I think, made Singapore SIA into what it is today. We don't have to worry about carrying domestic costs. Similarly, water. Because we had a shortage of water, we turned that into an opportunity. So the point of my story really is don't look at what you are challenged with, don't look at your problems, but look at see how you can actually convert your problems into opportunities. And this is what I think Hong Kong has been very good at, and I have every confidence that it will continue to do so, to look at how to turn challenges into opportunities. And here again, I think in my speech, I said that Singapore and Hong Kong, we share many challenges going forward. The issue of migration, the issue of population expansion, issue of infrastructure, crunches, housing. We do have a housing problem in Singapore. Even though 80% of our people live in public housing and good quality public housing, even though 90% of them own their homes, yet there is still a clamor for better quality housing, bigger flats, better locations. So I think the lesson is very simple. Human beings are never satisfied. They will always want more and more, and it is the jobs of elected governments to see how those aspirations can be fulfilled, and yet make those programs and policies sustainable. So if you want better housing, who's going to pay for it? You are prepared to pay higher taxes? Fine. We don't have any resources. So the whole system, the whole financial system of Singapore has to be self-sustaining, has to be sustainable, because we are not going to get more gold from the ground or more oil from the ground. So it's all depending on one point, and that is talent. And I think that's the final point I want to make, and that is that talent is the key. How do we get people, talented people, whether nurturing of talent from our own people or attracting talent from overseas? And this is the reason why we go to such great lengths to make Singapore such an attractive, livable city full of opportunities for people. And if we lose sight of those fundamentals and people don't want to come to Singapore because it is no longer attractive, because it is polluted, because their children can't go to schools, or because they get mugged in the streets or whatever, we are just going to go downhill. So I think that's the challenge for us, how to convince our people that we must still remain open. Still have people coming to Singapore even though they crowd our trains, even though they compete with us for housing. But if they are talented, if they are contributing, we must welcome them. So I think that's the point that I want to make. It is not just a matter of competition between cities, but how we can grow together as a global community. Thank you.
Thank you. But, well, since all our panelists have spoken on this, except Nelson, perhaps I could ask Nelson what you think of this last question, and particularly, to what extent do you think an improved supply of land for public housing will help overcome some of the problems of what you call the new poor?
As I listen to other speakers and also comments from the floor, what I feel is that, we speak through something which is, I must say, is very different from when I meet the people, as I just mentioned, those who are earning not very much, those not exactly very poor, but they can, get a decent living by themselves by working hard. But I must say the story which I hear from them is quite different. Say, for example, Jay just talked about the mass transit railway. I taught the MTR. I talked to some of the residents in Tin Shui Wai, which I have done the research some years ago. What they told me is that they take 20 minutes from their housing unit to go to the station by the night rail, because the station is in the south, the deep south of the whole Tin Shui Wai. And so those who are, it's not friendly at all for the users, because the station is located for other purposes, first for the private developers and not really for the public housing estates. So they have to take 20 minutes to get the night rail, and then from there to travel to Kowloon or to Tsuen Wan or to Hong Kong Island to work, and take them, if you say 40 minutes to Shenzhen, take them more than 1 hour to go to even to Kowloon to work. And that is very expensive. Sometimes they prefer to take the bus, a little bit cheaper, but that would take them 1.5 hours just going to work and then back. That's the story which I hear. You talk about the relationship between the executive and the legislature and all this, and see if we can come to a compromise, which I agree. I'm not a person that will go to extreme. I really want there's a compromise. But then if I listen to the new poor, which I just mentioned, the trouble is that their feeling is that their opinion have never been heard at all. And that's the reason why they are so discontented, so unhappy. They say they want not really universal suffrage or everyone have a vote, but at least you allow me to have a greater say in the decision-making process. I think that's the story which I hear. I hope that in this public policy series, we can take this into consideration. And not just thinking from, from top to bottom. Somehow, there are people, ultimately, they have to decide. They are the people who have to live here to get better living. And how we can do it. And that's the message I want to give in this morning's talk. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Nelson. Well, I think in view of time, I think we have time for 2 more questions. The gentleman back there, and then Sir David.
Yeah, but I want to thank all the speakers for your presentations. What I couldn't help but notice is when we talk about vision for Hong Kong, there's a lot of problems listed. There seems to be a tone of pessimism. And of course, then Dr. Ma talks about Singapore, and there seems to be optimism. And I just want to say that having been in Singapore for some time, we've always been looking at Hong Kong having mainland as the huge, backyard hinterland. The opportunities are great. And the geographical location is ideal despite one country, 2 systems and all those problems. So I think maybe we're not seeing the optimistic part, and the vision should have both reality as well as aspirations. So I'd just like to maybe invite Dr. Ma to share what is Singapore government's view about Hong Kong's advantage in relation to mainland, and how jealous you are of where Hong Kong is? Thank you.
Well, we are very envious. I think you are part of probably the fastest growing economy in the world, and very soon will be the largest economy in the world. And so we don't really understand why you are so pessimistic. I think thank you for giving me the opportunity to say this. But I think really there's a lot going for Hong Kong. I'm not diminishing the challenges that you face. And I think trying to get the politics right is very, very important. I mean, this is something that, as having been in government for many years and having to stand for elections every 5 years, I know how challenging it is to try to meet the demands of various groups and people. And partisan politics is very, very, to use a polite word, challenging. But nevertheless, it does give us a very robust, a very representative form of government, and we are able to do certain things, as I said, taking a long-term view into consideration, and that accounts for us. So the short answer really is yes, we are very envious of Hong Kong. Please cheer up, and I'm sure you'll be able to solve your problems. You've got very, very many talented, bright people here. Don't worry.
Thank you, Bhutan. David.
Well, I'm going to ask a question, and I already know the answer. But I'd like everyone here to hear the answer. This is the Oxford Hong Kong University of Science and Technology Leadership and Public Policy series. Almost every week, a seminar, a group like this, an audience, people on the platform, giving their answers, giving their answers to questions. But what are you going to do about finding the solution to these questions? We've had questions all the way along here of questions and problems. But now what are you going to do about it? Are we all going to go way back to our offices and think about our problems on the desk in front of us? Or are we going to think about the problems and the answers to the questions which have been raised this morning? What are we going to do? What's the continuation program? The Vice-Chancellors have left, I suppose. Angela is still there. Perhaps Angela can tell us the answer. But this is very important, this Oxford Hong Kong University of Science and Technology Leadership, and we come to the last word, serious. It's not the end, it's the beginning. So I hope we will meet again in the next few months and carry on until we've got the answers. So that's my question.
Thank you, David. Of course, Vincent is the chairman of the advisory board to the LAPP program. And Sir David is a member, as well as myself and several others. And I think we've had a very, very good sort of inaugural session. If you like, this is our first public appearance. And I think it's certainly, I can say it has been a success, looking at the number in the audience and the number, in fact, we have turned away or have no room, we have run out of room for. And the fact that so many of you are still here after 2.5, 3 hours. I think that's an excellent start. Where we go from here, I think that's probably on the agenda for our next advisory board meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation, and I thank all the speakers for their excellent presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Also, on behalf of the Leadership and Public Policy program, I would really like to convey my most sincere gratitude to this spectacular panel and the wonderful discussions that we have had this morning. I cannot thank enough all the people who have made this possible, but simply to echo the President's sentiments that we would really like to thank Dr. Vincent Lo, without whose generous support as well as prodding, this would not have been possible. Also, especially my advisors, and in particular, Sir David Akers-Jones, who has held my hand all along, Mrs. Laura Cha, Raymond Chen, and all the other advisors who have given so generously of their advice and support. A big thank you to the wonderful speakers again, and also to the staff who have worked beyond the boundaries of sanity. My gratitude goes beyond words. Thank you. See you at our next program. Thank you again.